happening with the programming. So just to let you all know, I think as we come to the end of this month, so there are two more sessions on this Lam Rim text that we have been looking at, the sacred words of Mañjuśrī, along with the commentary by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So there'll be one more Sunday session on this text after this, and then we will take a break as we come to that last weekend of August that kind of straddles August and September. The weekend after that, Geshe Sonam will be doing some guest teachings for us. If you aren't familiar with him, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's quite rigorous academic style, but also in English, and also he has a different take on things. So I think that people will really enjoy that. The nice thing is that he'll be teaching the concentration chapter of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. That's going to segue really nicely into the when we come back, Geshe Sonam and myself, which will be the second Sunday in September, and Geshe will begin the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. That's going to be the next topic in these teachings, and we'll go through doing that on Sundays. I would think at least until the end of October. So then, and along with that, I asked Geshe what his plans were for the side text. He thinks that, since we haven't gone through so much of Gampopa's text, we'll continue with the Gampopa. In terms of Geshe Sonam's weekend, in addition to the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, on the Friday evening, he's going to give a talk on how visualization meditation can be used to reinforce concentration. So a little bit of a tantric flavor connected with the concentration topic. And as always, of course, all of these things will be available to view later if you can't make it at the actual time. For those of you who are following the Vajrayana teachings, just a heads up that those Vajrayana teachings, all of them are still open. So if there's something you missed or wanted to watch again, those will be open until whenever the next installment of the series is. I believe that it is going to be the 3rd or 4th week of September, and that will be when Geshe is starting the new topic of Vajrabhairava, along with a drop of Vajrayogini's completion stage. He gave me his rationale for this. It's to put imprints in the mind for generation and completion stage, In addition to that, one of our community members, Ryan, is leading some meditation practice on Monday and Tuesday morning. So if you're a morning person, or if you want to try to be a morning person, that's something to check out, as well as Dave's literature circle. His book group will be starting again in September. So we have quite an exciting fall planned with some of the same things, some of the different things, and hopefully you'll all enjoy that. I see that now we are literally 1 minute after 10 o'clock, so I'll invite Geshe down. Please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, make yourself comfortable, and we'll get started shortly. So hi, folks, everybody. Just check and make sure you're muted as we do the class. But of course, when it comes to questions, you can unmute yourself. Can everybody hear Geshe Tashi Dele? Okay, greetings to all. And it looks like everyone can see myself. And it also looks like the picture is good. So I think we are good to go. Okay. Oh, geez.
So first
of all, Tashi Dele, greetings to everybody. Geshe hopes that your studies, that your practice, all of these things are going very well and improving. So, of course, we establish a good motivation. We are aiming towards a positive goal, something that is positive. But sometimes, of course, our experience of how things are going, sometimes it's going to seem to be going really well, and sometimes it's going to seem to be going not so well. But it's important to remember that we are aiming towards doing something good. So you can think about it as if you are going to a country, a very beautiful and pleasant country, which is a very good place. And this is your ultimate destination. Now, as you are journeying towards the country, some of the days of that journey are going to be pleasant, and some of the days of that journey are going to be maybe less pleasant. But it's really important to know that the place where you're actually going to end up is something very good and positive. So then one of the first teachings of the Buddha is, of course, the teaching on the four Arya truths. And when he speaks about true cessations, which is the last of those truths, he says cessations must be actualized. Cessations must be actualized. So when we speak about cessation, we understand that cessation is something that which results in a state that is completely beyond suffering, cuts off suffering. This is known as cessation. And we can understand that if we reach a place that is completely beyond suffering, completely beyond it, then the happiness that we are going to experience is a true and lasting happiness. The happiness that we experience before that happens is not true happiness. So then, of course, in order to be able to reach this state of true cessations, prayers are nice, pujas are nice, but prayers and pujas are not going to do that. What do we need to do? We need to embark on the path, right? And that brings us to another of those truths, true paths. And of course, the Buddha, these paths that he proposed, these weren't just something that he proposed kind of just off the top of his head. These were paths that he himself cultivated and completed. So on the base of those experiences, he proposed those paths.
저로서 대하고 지쇼세요.
So he says, these are the paths that I cultivated, that I meditated upon. Through meditating upon these paths, I was able to reach a result. And it is for that reason, therefore, that I advise you to do the same.
다원아 손지가 키로 아니 로곰바샤스 로곰바 고그요는 로 가르고니스더니 코
So then, of course, we say that, all right, well, the Buddha says meditate upon the path, but what path is he speaking of? Which paths are suitable to meditate upon?
다 땡아종 얘네 가게야지 저 머스그 고 얘네 가게야기네 지요아레.
And so these Lam Rim so
다 땡스가 고자야 돼.
Right. And so they are paths, they are, sorry, these are paths, these are positive meditations that anybody will like.
다 가르고니레바 이세는 공기 투제 니즈니 몰라더다. 와야 돼. 생체 여 매바. 자 전부전에 더 녀워서니라. 다 던지게 내서 지조지니 고자바.
So there's a verse that some of you may notice. Gom jabayins, gom di tipayins.
Jabares, korok.
So there is a verse that probably some of you will be familiar with, that goes with that probably most of you have heard. I prostrate to Gautama, who out of compassion taught the holy Dharma that leads to the relinquishing of all views. So Geshe is just explaining that the Buddha first meditated, connected with the part of this verse that talks about who out of compassion. This is why he taught, this is how he meditated. And Geshe is glossing part of that verse. The Tibetan is Kangi Tukse Niersungne. Some people will be so Geshe is saying you have to say what I said. The problem is what he said is not in the English translation, so I have to give you the Tibetan. I apologize. So Tukse Niersung. So this means to hold beings close with compassion. It's not just out of compassion, but from holding beings close out of compassion. The Buddha taught the Holy Dharma. Another thing here is that we have this habit of thinking that our problems are difficulties. All of these are arising due to external factors. This, in fact, is not the case. So the advice here is that if we are able to practice as the Buddha did, holding these beings close, seeing them as close to us, this is actually like a spiritual suit of armor that we put on, and those external factors will not be so able to disturb us. So it's another way, and it's a little bit similar to in the deity yoga practices of putting on the armor. This is another way to put on the armor. So all of the methods practice method practices, can sort of be tied into this. And really, this particular way of understanding and practicing, all of the scientists in the world, they could not say that this is not scientific or not something reasonable. So when we speak of Buddhist science, it is these kind of understandings that are like the best examples of that. And that also shows us that right from now, we can begin the process. We can open the door to working towards that happiness. So is that enough, though, just holding beings close? Is that enough to reach that happiness? Well, it's a start, but in and of itself is not enough. And so then what does that mean? That means if we want to reach the true happiness, what we need to do is address the root of our difficulties, and that root is the afflictions.
단 녀모세 메다야 거로 끼고 매봐서 기질은 가로선다 지금 눈이 녀모세 메다 바래.
So we can say that afflictions, which are nyomong in Tibetan, we can say that those minds which make us unhappy, these are afflictions.
단 멀리야와요 말에 던돌려야와요 말에 센질려야와요 말에 요줄 끼고요도 매세하데 단 녀모텔레서는 세이나 끼고 매봐서요.
Whether we speak about human beings, whether we speak about animal beings, any type of sentient being that we can think of, actually, when these afflictions arise, they are unhappy, right? So happiness and unhappiness are connected to that.
단 던지게 녀모데 세가 코로 로지이나 빼나 차와데 메이 로지로 왔어. 차와데 메이 로지에서 메가데 요나고 차와데 잘 롱메바 요아 왔어.
So the next question arises, well, are these afflictions actually our mind's true nature? So in the way that we say that heat is the nature of fire, because wherever there is fire present, there is heat. So is the same true of our mind and the afflictions?
차와 메이 로지에만 로지 녀모데 세가 로지이나 단 아주 싫어서요 말했어. 다 니가 거기고서 해야지 마도.
So, if this was the case, if just as a heat is fire's true nature, in this way, if the afflictions were the mind's true nature, then there wouldn't be much we can do in terms of cultivation, because in fact, all we could do is just try to seize those fleeting temporary moments of happiness. We couldn't go beyond that. So, of course, the Buddha's teaching says that, this in fact is not true, right? That that the mind's true nature is not that of the afflictions, and that in fact, if we are able to study and practice the teachings, we can separate the mind from the afflictions. But in order to be able to uproot these afflictions completely, we need to be able to eliminate the mistaken views that feed them. And so then this is connected to the part of the verse that we just read about who taught the holy Dharma that leads to the relinquishing of all views.
So, of course,
we should understand that, the Buddha and him being a precious holy being, that this did not arise without causes and conditions, right? That he became this way through his continued engagement with the practices of method and wisdom. And so another thing, and it's not easy, but as much as possible, we want to see how, because things are empty, they are dependent arisings. And as things arise dependently, they are empty. This is not an easy thing to discern, but we want to try to bring forth within our mind at least a bit of an understanding of this. And then once we kind of go through with this, we'll be able to also see how the practices of method and the practices of wisdom actually assist each other back and forth. They can help each other. And also emptiness without that other factor, emptiness, if we meditate on that exclusively and too strongly, there's this danger, right, that we can fall into an extreme view of nihilism. And it was for this reason that the Buddha of wisdom Mañjuśrī, he instructed Lama Tsongkhapa, that do not see emptiness and dependent arising as far away from each other. Do not see them as unrelated.
Yeah,
so that doesn't mean so that advice, just to be clear, it doesn't mean that whenever we're meditating upon emptiness, we also need to be meditating upon dependent arising. That's not what it's saying. Because of course we know that if we are in meditative equipoise upon emptiness, that is the single object. We can't also bring in dependent arising at that moment. But when we are not in meditative equipoise upon emptiness, when we are not doing placement meditation with emptiness as our sole object, when we are analyzing, when we are reflecting, then we can think as much as possible, try to bring these two together, emptiness and dependent arising. Another thing to understand too is that as we progress these positive mental qualities, they won't become old, they won't become weakened. Actually, what we'll find is that the more we become habituated to these positive mental qualities, the stronger and stronger they become. So if we think about things in this way, then we see that we have a goal. We see that this is something doable, and this should help encourage us and bring forth a courageous attitude. So we know, and also, we also know that in terms of samsaric things, right? If we place all of our hopes and dreams in those things, the beautiful things that we obtain, the houses, the flowers, whatever the thing we are seeking, slowly, right? These become older, these become less satisfying and so forth. So they are not reliable. It's true with our body too, right? No matter sort of how well we take care of it, how strong we become, how handsome or beautiful we are able to make our body, we know the truth, which is that as we age, right, it is also going to age. But there's one thing that we can say here. It doesn't matter what your race or ethnicity is. It doesn't matter what your age is. In some ways, what type of being you are. If we practice method and wisdom continuously, habituate ourselves to that, there is more and more improvement that is possible. So that's one of the most important things to keep in mind. So maybe a bit of too much of an introduction, but important points to remind you nonetheless. So now we are going to So now we are going to do the preliminary meditation. Geshe says it'll be short meditation this week. So bring the body and mind into a state of peace. Think, I am relaxing the body. I am relaxing the mind. And in this way, I am bringing the elements into balance.
Any appearance
that arises doesn't need to create difficulty. We understand that although it seems something findable, pinpointable. It is not findable at all. So relax the mind. So self, others, forests, fences, any object that we can think of, nominally, of course, they do exist or function, but they do not exist in a pinpointable way, in the way that they appear. So the mind, the self, and the like, of course, these work, they perform functions, they think, engage in activities, and so forth. Yet at the same time, they don't have a particular shape, a particular color, or size. In this way, there is nothing pinpointable, nothing findable to hold on to. And so although it does not have any sort of pinpointable essence, any discernible shape, color, and so forth, if we engage in the practices of method with our mind, bringing forth love, compassion, and bodhicitta, these things can be strengthened, they can be brought to fruition. To bring forth method to the point of perfection, the practices of wisdom to the point of perfection, as much as possible, I am going to engage with those in a stable way in order to be able to stabilize this. I single-pointedly, faithfully request the blessings of the holy beings. So we'll do the chanting. Jom den de jin je ba ja jom ba yan da ba zo pe sang je ba dang shab su dem ba de war she Jiten Kemba Kebudu Galo Gyora Lana Meba Lada Minam Gitemba Sangye Shaw
gyatso bala chaselo chede gyabsu chi ho Tenpa chondende deshin cheba drachomba yangdaba zobe sangye sheba dang shabsu tenpa dewa sheba shiten chenpa chebu dewe kalo jorwa lana meba ladami namgi tenpa sangye chondende pechawa shakya tubala chaselo chede kyabsu chi ho Tenpa chondende deshin cheba drachomba yangdaba zobe sangye sheba dang shabsu tenpa dewa sheba shiten chenpa chebu dewe kalo jorwa lana meba ladami namgi tenpa sangye chondende pechawa shakya tubala chaselo chede kyabsu chi ho Mandala Soji Pagi Joshi Meto Chan Jira Linji Nidi Gyamba Di Sangye Jinda Mete Bovagi Rogu Nanda Jinla Chebar Sho Idang Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami Refuge and Bodhicitta Chedang soki chenam la Jangchu bardu dani kyasu chi Dagi chenyen gibe senam gi Jola penche sange drubar sho Chedang soki chenam la Jangchu bardu dani kyasu chi Dagi chenyen gibe senam gi Jola penche sange drubar sho Chedang soki chenam la Jangchu bardu dani kyabsu chi Dagi chenyen gibe senam gi Jola penchir sange drubar sho Yo jisangi
Otangaro Tangila de Aspena Sunji Joden de Koro Combotoba Sunji Mato Pada Naroso Nanga said Chimbuta Leka Chatson do you stand up.
Oh, so until we are able to actualize that same state of enlightenment that Buddha Shakyamuni himself achieved, the various activities and so forth that that the I engages in, these won't be exactly just right. And just to speak of it plainly, if we speak about the attainment of Buddhahood, complete enlightenment, and we speak about it from the perspective of one's own welfare, it is that state where one's own welfare is completely achieved. So if you really see the self or the I as important, it's other than kind of aiming for that state of complete enlightenment, and that there's no other way to go really. So also to be clear, right, achieving this real happiness, that state of happiness completely beyond suffering just for ourselves, that's also not the furthest that we need to go. What we need to do is to be able to achieve a state where we are also able to guide others to that same happiness. And that is the state that is known as supreme liberation, the attainment of Buddhahood. And so in order to cultivate that, we need the practice which allows us to abandon mistaken paths in the favor of correct paths, refuge, and the practice that allows us to abandon a limited path in terms of in favor of a vast path, the mind generation or bodhicitta. A mistaken path, because it's mistaken, then right from the beginning, it's not going to lead us to the destination of the result that we want. And then if it's a limited path, of course, it's not maybe going to be the easiest way to get there. It's going to take a very long time, not going to lead to the best outcome. So, of course, when we speak about the state of moksha, of liberation, of the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, the hearers and the solitary realizers, right? These are valid paths. They are states of moksha or liberation. But if we compare their attainment of liberation to the full enlightenment of a Buddha, then the limitations become clear, right? The drawbacks become clear. And in a way, one could even say it's mistaken. Sorry, Geshe says he wants to correct, not mistaken, limited. Limited. So it's so clarifying there, limited. So, if we look at ourselves as people who right from the beginning have an affinity with the practice of great love, with the practice of great compassion, and with the attainment of Buddhahood, this is a very fortunate thing. So perhaps, again, a bit of some long comments, but we are now going to take a moment to meditate to set the motivation. So as you breathe in and out, as you breathe out, imagine that all of the stale winds, prana, energy, also any unhelpful thoughts, discursive thoughts, and so forth, that all of these are cleared from the body. They go out. And as we breathe in, imagine that we receive the blessings, the positive blessings of the holy body, speech, and mind of the enlightened beings. This way we have cleared the body, the four elements are in balance. We can think we have purified and calmed the mind. Through this practice, we've brought into balance the winds, the chakras or channels that they flow through, the blood, and the other elements. All of this contributes to a feeling of peace. So in order to be able to bring forth this mind with this precious potential, to activate that potential, then we want to bring forth this mind, this awareness that sees every being as connected to us, as close to us, that views them as attractive, this mind of affectionate love.
야고따와 이나 롱로 소소가 니가도 타두기 대시 강가 요사가 자완다고 신자고다 로 생제 세아티 대이자 강가 자치목이네 렌드 소바치.
If we think about it in a vast way, we see that however, every temporary happiness we achieve, every ultimate happiness that we achieve, all of these things have sentient beings as the source of that. Sentient beings are the root of all of this. In this way, hold them close to you.
요주 등어도 자 요주 타투게 대시라 치바데 달래가 여쇼르데 디체다 예수지지 공부 토바소기 인솜부터네다 쇼지지세.
The best thing would be that I could completely separate them from suffering, that I could lead them to that state of true and lasting happiness. For this reason, I wish to achieve Buddha's enlightenment, bring forth bodhicitta.
로제 요주 저는 노세가 시도 예대 가리나요다 로지지 저매아에서 덴데소만 노지다 가서 터터 토그레 좀
Whether myself or others, whether we speak about the faults of the mind, the positive mental qualities, not any of these things is inherently existent, exists from its own side. For this reason, change is definitely possible. So we'll pause there. Ale. So as in accordance with our motivation, what we wanted to achieve, we understand that this is achieved in stages, and so we are now going to embark on our discussion of the text. So Geshe said that the text is, very mellifluous, very beautiful to hear, and also very meaningful. So it's excellent to engage with. So just let me.
Tuma tanjola lo yoni zu lo yumba ni zu sheme tezo tobi chedong deni sikpa taje shepe lava sanje lo nyole shajeno ganda tashu nyepa la lo gipin dewa yochi garure garse
nyepa lopa
dewa
yopchinde jochi ale los ya tene
tanjoni zu tanjolo ba ni zu ita tsini ma to ita.
And so Kawajosan, Nyepa logo jewa yopa shitu jorchi ngunjo chakien de la tene, de la yer.
Didn't get that, it's that and do us that Tuma Tanjo Loban is we.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Gosh, he wants to have the paragraph together. So we're not starting from where we left off. We're going just a few sentences above that. So if you have the text, we're on page 102. And we are in the second paragraph from the bottom that starts from the very outset. So I'll read that. From the very outset, starting with training the mind with respect to leisure and opportunities, there is no contradiction with practicing the three trainings for the sake of attaining a good future rebirth and bringing an end to rebirth. On the contrary, they are completely related in that they are necessary to practice. Ngondru loma sonjwa. Ngondru loma sonjwa. Ngunjo chakien de la tene di droma so.
O that chitenda karasigu yarsena shivu chuniga lo to shivun diga lor in Ngawang ma. Yes. O koropoe kubado masina.
So what's being said here is that we should understand that the stages of the path of the small scope and the stages of the path of the middle scope, for example, that these are not contradictory things. Rather, they are like the kind of levels of a house that fit together. So if we look at the three attainments of spiritual practice according to the Lam Rim, we can look at these as like the three levels of a house or building. That's a helpful image. So, of course, in terms of as we progress to the higher scopes, what we may leave aside sort of, taints of self-cherishing. But in terms of the practices themselves, like training in ethics, concentration, and wisdom, recognizing the human rebirth with the freedoms and richnesses, these are all things that are going to be maintained continuously. So through those prerequisites, the focus of meditating on one's own suffering is shifted to that of others through meditating on compassion. And thus, one trains in a cause and effect process, independence upon this teaching. So the thing to understand here is that if we have not trained in the preliminary practice of definite emergence renunciation, thinking about the faults of samsara and developing fear and a wish to be free from it, then taking the mind to the next step, to the point of being able to assist others by developing love and compassion, wishing them to be free from suffering, that won't be possible.
That doesn't mean that we don't need to engage with compassion, but what it does mean is that when we speak about the fully fully powerful compassion, right? Compassion in the truly powerful instance, this requires as a prerequisite, right? Having trained in one's own fear about samsara. So the thing here is, if we have a strong sort of understanding regarding ourself of the problems that we face in samsara and the wish to be free, and then we combine this with the points that we just cultivated about seeing all beings as connected to us, as very close to us, then the unfolding of love and compassion in our practice is going to happen more easily. Furthermore, everything taught in the Lam Rim literature is said to be a fundamental prerequisite or branch in the context of the secret mantra vehicle. So whether the practices of Tantra become effective, precious, and powerful, this directly corresponds to having well trained in the common path. Yes. So continuing. In summary, overcoming attachment to the experiences of this life, overcoming attachment to the experiences of the next life, and practicing the jewel of bodhicitta that discards the focus on one's own aims and holds others dearer than oneself, all are indispensable foundations even in the practice of secret mantra. Therefore, the first of the four greatnesses, the greatness of realizing all teachings to be non-contradictory, is possessed by this treatise. So
So also cultivating this text helps us to kind of uproot the mistaken view that just aiming for the happiness of this life alone is a reasonable way to go about things. The next aim, thinking, okay, achieving higher rebirth, the state of a human or a deva realm, that this is kind of like my main goal. This also needs to be challenged. It's not to say that it's not a worthy goal in some respects, but just that merely wishing for a higher rebirth is not enough. It's not okay in and of itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, of course, Geshe said that we talk about the rebirth that we have right now as a dedro, as a happy rebirth. So, of course, in order to kind of fill that definition, we do need to be experiencing some samsaric happiness. We know, right, that if our body and our mind are not happy and balanced, we are not going to be able to practice the Dharma well, even if we want to. But just aiming at that high rebirth, just aiming for that happiness, if that is all we keep in mind, then, you know, from the vaster point of view, it is a great waste. Yeah, so Geshe is reading out that verse that kind of just rolled off his tongue because it's all here. And I, of course, haven't memorized all these verses, but I looked it up yesterday and translated it. So it's from the Madhyamakavatara, entering the middle way texts. So it goes something like this: having comforts through generosity, yet miserable, and that means miserable in the context of being in the lower realms. This arises from breaking the limb of discipline. Having exhausted all your investments, later there will not be a yield of wealth or a yield of comfort. So this verse might not exactly describe our current situation, but it describes a danger that we could fall into if we habituate only towards kind of practicing to achieve those temporary happinesses. So what this is pointing at, having achieved comforts through generosity, yet miserable in lower states, this arises from breaking the limb of discipline. What that's pointing to, Geshe is giving the example of like many dogs or cats. They live in very comfortable homes. They have very pleasant circumstances, yet they have this lower rebirth as an animal, right? So this is due to that problem of not having discipline, but having been generous.
And
those dogs and those cats, like the ones that live a good life, we can definitely say that they are like relatively happy, right? We see that they can be happy creatures. But one of the main problems here is that the comforts that they're enjoying, they're just experiencing those as the results through an exhausting of their previously accumulated merit. And it's very difficult for them to accumulate new merits and virtues. And it's the same for us, right? Like if we just sort of enjoy our life, enjoy good food and comforts and so forth, but we don't engage in new virtuous practices, then, the balance right, that we're talking about here, the powers of those merits, they are just going to go towards exhaustion.
다 강감문제야도 말다 제키고 요도 야로 뭐 요아레.
강금미체에서는
레카 제키.
알레.
데 게와 저게 챈데 찌볼로.
Yeah.
또 계셔와지마 개말나요. 대시 저게 매바도 저게 매바 말다.
Sorry, so Geshe is clarifying something. He's also not saying that people who work for the sake of this life, that means that they don't accumulate any positive merits, right? Even sort of with that limited vision, if they don't accept past and future lifetimes, for example, there are many people who are accumulating wholesome positive merit.
오다 모터스 대단해 와요. 오다 첸디 누제도 봐도 시민 누제도 봐서 오다 심마 집어 당길라서 송왔어. 다요체 도보 소소 집어게 되는 타바토는 그 뇌서 막 하고서 다 대용한도 소리 셈발리티데 파자야레스.
And so we talked about this generosity without discipline. This leads to a rebirth, maybe as the pet in a wealthy household. And then, 기억자스마 연결성당.
야 루데 이제 세근도 왔어.
말이 간서 탈파 간서 시미당 기든소당 탈파디 저와 카레에스 간서 보고마스.
해 주도 먼저 타서 왔어 내가. 안된 로근도 왔어.
알레. listen. 가오야.
이거 노아도 봐.
오케이.
노아도 봐. 아니 루데 이제 야 단다 사줘서.
Oh, right. Oh, 하고.
소소 집이 된데 타박은 저거래서 봐 대용.
Right.
다 전제 선발에 파부자래 되어레스.
Right. So then Geshe is just going back to the text, just kind of jumping around here. So, and the practicing the jewel of bodhicitta that regards the focus of one's own aims and holds others as dear than oneself. So this is, not striving towards liberation solely for oneself. And so also just making clear that these are really important points to consider related to the practice of secret mantra as well. So if we understand this quality of the treatise, then we can understand how it is going to help us to understand that all of the teachings of the Buddha are without contradiction. Also that, for example, sutra and tantra are without contradiction.
다 제자 된지 채워지고 롱지라 총기바스 도송아 제자 다리 산소 됐더니 산소 따자고 시키면 돼.
지금 거기면 돼. 가일라 그래.
제자 된지 채워지고 롱지라 타마타마티.
아.
치 타마타마티. 뭐게. 타마. 아데 디바들레 차이마 단계.
Ale, loso. So that helps us to realize how all of the teachers are, all of the teachings are non-contradictory. Juja dungi chewa, right?
Juja dungi chewa jiwo rojila, roi.
Yeah.
Tsongkhapa sumba tar chijo laba shawa yembis.
So, therefore, the Lam Rim literature possesses the greatness of expressive words. It is taught that the four greatnesses of their subject matter must be present in one's own continuum, and one must train in them by all means. So what this is pointing to is actually, so we can say that these four greatnesses that we've been discussing, the text definitely possesses those four greatnesses, but mainly we want to actually incorporate those four greatnesses into our own mind. That's what we mean by continuum here. So we want to bring forth a feeling in our mind for these four greatnesses and an understanding of them. This is something that's going to be really beneficial.
Yeah.
So, therefore, the various presentations of the path taught for the sake of the trainees of the three vehicles, the three lineage beings, are the prerequisite branches for entering into the Mahayana.
Yes,
So when we speak about these three vehicles, you should know these, right? We know immediately right away. This is the Shravaka, the hearer vehicle, the solitary realizer, the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle, and the Bodhisattva or Mahayana vehicle.
this one, what in the Vache, what to do? Tarichi, Jesus, let the Poson. You teach a lordship, Beloshi, Rujaja lordship, Beloshi, teach a lordship, Loshi, Tonche, Sheshi, Zone, Zeus, Shegiba, Shesh and Dolly Sumba, the lot, the letter was she gave.
So, in order to take care of the other lineage beings, knowledge of the Shravaka path, the Pratyeka Buddha path, and the Mahayana path should all be generated, understood, and brought to completion as taught in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras.
Oh, that in your teaching, Lila was Shabayina. Loshi Sum Segaduas, the Loshi Sum.
Yep.
Rujaja Lord, Yetija Loshiba,
Yep.
Rujaja Loshiba. On it, and currently.
Yeah. So just going back to the discussion of these three paths, we'll just set them out again. The Shravaka here path, the Pratyeka Buddha solitary realizer path, and the Mahayana or Bodhisattva path.
That Lila was in a Dembaja. Yes, the to be Shira de Hakuson.
Yeah.
Dembajang yes to be Shira de Yeti to Rujani Gata Loshi teres. Loshi Loshi.
Lobshi sana?
Lundiru Timita. Loshi.
Labshi. Tiskua.
Yeti Loshi be Loshi.
Lobshi sana kandere.
Make that. Adi. Yeti Loshi be Loshi.
Lamshe be lamshe. Tiskua ngachitago. Tiskua. Oh, okay. Lamshe. Right. Okay. Lamshe. Okay. So then, and the younger Sundang, sorry, just dialect thing. Yes. Yep.
Right. So
Geshe is just saying that here we have this word. So it's the word knowledge of the Shravaka path and knowledge of the Pratyeka Buddha path. So Geshe is just explaining what that knowledge is. In the case of those, Nigarwa, Dembaji, in the case of those, it is the knowledge, the understanding of the four Arya truths, the Four Noble Truths, and their 16 aspects.
또 레가조 가르소 토요르센 마고파나 니티이나레 루자이나레 코로솔 펜바치 모도 토요레스
Candice Pempa Chimpo Kare Jotugiras.
코로스 야요 타지야 야 팁티 그러와 소소 치텐 야 티가러와
Right.
오타 테니자네 예다 디제데 야보도 토요레스
Candice Lagare Chedela Tenero.
Yeah.
And so on the basis of those teachings of the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha path, through realizing that, they can come to their goals.
Yeah. 코로스고 뇨레게 조 데러와스 데이자 땡아로스고 제 코로스를 펜바드발라 나로스 데시가러와스.
Oh, right. And so because those with the affinity for the Shravaka Buddha and Pratyeka Buddha paths have that as their goal, we ourselves must be familiar with that as well so that we can help them. I finally got there.
What that do us? That Tewachi Beloshi Sena.
So when we speak about the knowledge of the Mahayana path in this context, we could say that in this particular angle, it's that knowledge of Rangjime Barwa, how things lack true or inherent existence. And another thing to be said here, when one achieves the path of seeing, the Mahayana path of seeing, also necessarily one has also achieved the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha paths of seeing.
Yep.
So then the next part of the text is giving a source for these statements, and the source is the homage verse of the Abhisamaya Lamkara. The Abhisamaya Lamkara is the ornament of clear realizations. So, continuing on, as Venerable Maitreya said in the homage verse of the Abhisamayalamkara, those who benefit migrators and achieve the aims of this world only through the knower of paths. This exemplifies that the Buddha's teachings take into account the huge responsibility of bodhisattvas and tantric practitioners, wherein they teach that they are not permitted to listen to nor contemplate the Shravaka treatises, nor that it is suitable for them to stay in the dwelling of a practitioner of Shravaka Dharma for 7 days, must also be meditated on as secondary in order that one takes care of others and increases one's own realizations. Right. Right. So those who benefit migrators and they achieve the aims of this world are only through the knower of paths. Geshe is saying a really important thing to understand about this verse is a knower of all 3 of these paths, Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, and Mahayana. Yep. And so also Geshe said a really interesting thing in the gloss here. It talks about, how in some tantric texts it says that one shouldn't engage with the Shravaka teachings or stay in the home of a Shravaka practitioner. But actually, if one has this knowledge of the paths in the correct context, this is something very helpful. So Geshe just said that in terms of some of the differences in the teaching, if we look at the Vinaya, for example, the teachings on monastic discipline, novice and fully ordained monks and nuns, well, in the case of a monk, for example, you wouldn't be able to touch a female whatsoever. It's simply not permitted. But according to the Bodhisattva teachings, actually, not just one's mother, one's relatives, and so forth, but for example, shaking someone's hands and so forth, this is permitted in the context of the Bodhisattva vehicle. So one actually comes to see how all of these things are non-contradictory. Not okay. Not very nice. Yep. So, as we continue, when practicing such points, it is said in applying the advice of the 3 jewels, although having listened extensively, one is bereft of dharma. This is the fault of the teachings not appearing as instructions. This is a case, I have to read it for you guys. This is a case of not understanding the vital points of proving the teachings of realization through the cause and understanding of the scriptural teachings. Thus, the great yogi Gyatso Rinchen states, someone who has reached certainty about a pithy little volume cannot be said to know all the topics of instructions. This is said about someone who understands all the Buddha's teachings as instructions. So this is warning that if one is holding on to just one essential instruction and saying that, this is very precious, so I don't need to cultivate these other things that might even be in contradiction to what I am practicing, one comes very close to the danger of abandoning the Dharma, the fault of abandoning the Dharma. And so Geshe is just saying that in terms of, and maybe I'll look this up for people to see if it's available in English. If it is, I'll share it. Applying the Advice of the Three Jewels is a composition by Lama Tsongkhapa, actually. Yeah, so Geshe said he actually was looking at it the other day and he thought maybe this is something nice to do in a future class. So maybe something we can do in a future class. So within that text, it explains how all of the Buddha's teachings, these are methods that we can practice. They are things that are not in contradiction. So for that reason, you know, something very helpful. Yeah, tons.
Teta saji living lo chokawa nola gundeji techi chemo nole sawa tembi surato gundeni mashebe nyonsa lecha mengwa seba juzo juze zonyo mela. Teta ni jache shepe teton je lonje ramba nani je kaza nyenjo to nije njuke ramba sede shenji dashi tswala ngipa nyepa na surato je donga la chai chawayi.
So the method for achieving even the slightest happiness and so on of higher rebirths and definite goodness is contained either explicitly or implicitly the Buddha's stainless, I think there's a missing in there, in the Buddha's stainless speech. However, since those are vast and profound, they were clarified further in Shastras, commentaries, which unravel the intention for those beings who find them difficult to understand. There are no unofficial pith instructions of practices left unexplained in the Buddha's discourses or the scholars' treatises. Ascertaining that all points extensively explained in those are condensed and complete in the stages of the Path Treatise in a comprehensive manner through the preparatory, actual, and conclusion stages is the greatness of all teachings appearing as instructions. So going back to the four greatnesses. So all of the vast teachings of the Buddha, these are spoken to bring a benefit to all migrating sentient beings to help them achieve the states of excellent goodness and higher status. But, you know, practice this, don't practice this. This should be cultivated by that person, or that should be cultivated by this person. These are all sort of, you know, you have to sometimes take into account the affinities and capacities of different beings. Sukang kyunche chogyo mares. Right. So, you know, if we were to tell a small child that, okay, like you're going to embark on your first year of university without them having gone to like primary school and middle school and high school, like that's not going to be a very realistic thing, right? So one wants to kind of follow things in order. Right. But if we also understand how these things fit together and they are all skillful means to come to this point, then we are able to see the greatness of the teachings appearing as instructions, things that we actually need to do. Right. Sange korangi karimare?
Tawa tatu kumbangine de mare sonsangine.
Ale do kashiro. Right. So there are cases where the Buddha made proclamations according to benefit a particular sentient being of a particular capacity or affinity. But we should understand the context of those instructions, those provisional instructions, which are not actually the Buddha's final intention, but were just spoken in that moment for that being. So within the Buddha's teachings, right, there's many different kind of philosophical views that are expressed. This is why we have this sort of outline of these various schools of Buddhist philosophies, right? The Sutra school, the Great Exposition school, the Mind-only school, the Middle Way school, and then even within those broader categories, there's also subcategories of philosophical views. Yeah, and so His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that expression of these diverse views, we can also understand that instruction of that if the Buddha were in the world today, he would tell us to value and respect all religious traditions, all spiritual paths. Because, all of those various views, those various systems that are spoken, they are spoken in a way that might benefit sentient beings of a particular capacity or a particular affinity. Right. So continuing with the gloss here. Some think that the great authoritative treatises function merely to eliminate the superimpositions of logic and refute certain Buddhist and non-Buddhist views and tenets, and thus that the essential meaning does not need to be practiced. Therefore, they think that's it's like I'm racing ahead all the time. Therefore, they think that studying is unnecessary and that pith instructions are the object of practice exist elsewhere. Saying that one has consolidated Dharma practice even though one has not studied the authoritative treatises is a misunderstanding. That's where we're leaving. So there's many Tibetans also who hold this view, right? That a lot of the proclamations and the treatises of the Buddha, these were proclaimed, for people to sort of debate and refine their views. But in terms of what is actually practiced, we should just practice the essential instructions, the pith instructions, because these are what is precious and holy. This is mistaken. Yeah, again. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama is refuting this view here, and essentially what he's saying is that all of these teachings of the Buddhas of the Buddha are things that should be studied and practiced. And in fact, if we find a later teaching that claims to be a pith instruction or an essential instruction that is in contradiction with the Buddha's teachings, then it is that pith instruction that should be abandoned, not the Buddha's teaching. So whether an essential instruction is something that should be practiced or not, this can be determined by whether that essential instruction is congruent with the Buddha's teachings or not. If it is congruent, if it is in harmony with the Buddha's teachings, then it has a valid source and is something valid to be practiced. Otherwise, not. So generally speaking, personal instructions, this is what I'm giving as pith instructions. The Tibetan word is mengak. There's different ways of translating it. Personal instructions refers to methods that cause one to easily realize the intended meaning of the Buddha's words, of the Buddha's teachings on the vast and profound paths that accomplish liberation and omniscience. So Geshe said, in this way, we could say that the king of the personal instructions, the king of the pith instructions, would be a text like the Abhisamayalankara, the ornament of clear realizations. Madhyamakavatara, entering the middle way. Tsawasherab, the root of wisdom. Junjuk Tempo, the Bodhisattvacharyavatara, way of the Bodhisattva. Those are the personal instructions. Yeah.
파이지 KPT 군데 땡지 빼니자도 년시 고시에 바 대노 시발라 펜바신도나 대는 맹아이 대문 맹아 시바시 시라 저조조조 까돈저와 체르 마차바시도 누나 루니네 맹아 고마테 레바 마시비시 이사 예놈.
Therefore, if it is something that helps one understand the meaning of the spoken word of the Buddha, the Kangyur, numbering around 100 volumes as translated into Tibetan, or to understand the approximately 220-volume commentarial canon, the Tengyur, of the scholars from the land of the Aryas, that unravels their intention, then this is a pith instruction.
요나 맹아도 지 유도 동아 대다라 이땡 이즈메 비타스 사위 덴드 시치도 드시시 타데 메바 조덴데지 지비제지 뜻숨바 타다 로지 주본더니 네 덴드 타 넘바 나츠베고니 덴비스.
Other than that, if one finds that however much one studies a so-called pith instruction that it leads to greater disconnect from the Kangyur or Tengyur, it is clearly either the fault of not thoroughly understanding the actual pith instruction or a sign that one had no firm conviction in the treatise or instruction considered to be pith instruction. Thus, explanatory dharma and practical dharma are not different things. The 84,000 heaps of dharma taught by the Buddha are all various methods for taming our own stubborn mind.
까테 수라 대노 미루센 데탈라 신진 저터바 시동 저 시바시 슈나 유텔라 때니 수라 통치 동아데 차터바 시고.
Since this is the case, a treatise will enable us to see all teaching as instructions if it is able to holistically consolidate the teachings of the Kangyur and Tengyur as methods for taming our mind.
So
that's actually, we can understand that as a gloss or a definition of what we mean by essential instruction or pith instruction and so forth. In particular, since there are different phases of the minds of Dharma practitioners, juvenile, mature, and old, if one understands the different ways to practice, considering the different stages of development of the mind in accordance with those phases, then one realizes all the Buddha's teachings as non-contradictory, and all teachings without exception appear as instructions. Thus, one must understand that all hearing, contemplation, and practice can come about through a single great treatise. Yeah. So Geshe said, this is pretty self-evident. So we are going to leave our discussion here for now. Just find a sticky note so I don't forget where we left off.
Yes,
yeah. So just a gloss here that's important to say. Understanding that all the Buddha's teachings are without contradiction, that does not mean thinking that all of the Buddha's teachings are definitive, right? This is a point we need to be careful about. So we are now switching to the text by Gampopa.
This one?
Yeah. Le Tamboa Kapla. Le Tamboa. Yeah. Yeah. Le Tamboa. Nenten Duce. Chuchuni Marbe.
Huh? Yeah.
Ale jeba gubarebe los. Oh. Ale los.
Then the charge was one.
Then the charge. So kawaii. The charge. Det är med man dunga. Det är med man dunga. Ja. Semshu kiagine so churwa.
Ja.
Semshu kiagine so tu.
Ja.
Tambodi dejorwa.
Me. Le tombo wala. Tisola ne teshasa.
Ja, die hakusum.
Tinunu gwates.
Ale guparwa. Di tambore, dela.
Gowa Sandrosa, Imbas Kasung, Jiva Sandrosa, so
Ale. Oh, right.
Cancer.
Chupa rua. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Le tamboa couple, did it?
Carletum. Let them watch it.
Le tamboe tusamla nintenja.
Tendrosas, was Tinimas, Giandrosas.
Ale, loso. Then it seek tambo carere.
Never don't the man, then do charge Chena, Chemba Zetas, Lupa, Netesha. Tere, what you going to go up? And Netesha, Chichu,
Nitin chawe chuchurua. Right.
Very weird.
Oh, sorry. I'm just having problems finding where we are.
I wanted to put the $2,000 to Matthias and don't do
Mare, losho yangachi.
on the cancer.
Le tamboa.
Let them both you know, give up at the letters was castle.
Right. And so the seed group go kajitsugire dilash.
Then the charge Chena, Chemba Zetas, Lupa, Netesha.
Dundu chawe chena.
Dun
chajin chena. Right. Okay. So now I know where we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you feel strong cravings for desirable things, persevere in decisively turning away from attachment. Losos. Right. So one of the things this is showing us is whichever of the kind of afflictions is the strongest, then immediately kind of cultivate the antidote to that. Right. Yep. Right. So here it's giving attachment as the example, right? For someone who has strong cravings for desirable things. So you have to persevere in turning away from that. But for somebody who has anger as their main affliction, they will need to persevere in turning away from that. And so for this reason also, when we talk about the 4 doors to the accumulation of faults, this is another important thing to consider. So this involves the practice the goji current. So then it's very important for the practitioner to understand which of their afflictions is the most powerful and to cultivate the antidote to that. So Geshe was mentioning these four doors to the accumulation of faults, but I'm not seeing the connection. That's why I'm asking. Yep. Yeah, so I think it might not be directly related to these 4 doors to the accumulation of faults. Geshe said there may be another list of 4 with a different name. When your love and compassion are feeble, persevere in the training of the awakened frame of mind. So that's bodhicitta. So this is saying, when you want to reach bodhicitta, but then the love and compassion are maybe not strong enough, think about what the preliminary practices are that you need to cultivate, what the method will be to bring forth those minds more strongly. So these are the 10 things to persevere in. Oh, take it on yes. So here are the 10 things to inspire yourself. reflecting on the difficulty of obtaining the freedoms and riches, inspire yourself to adopt the sacred dharma. So we're on page 6, everybody.
어떤 니가 그 샤와 춘주들은 거 코네 소소 담마체 다 줄라는 거 도야 그냥가 요나 저저 단전 얘가도 다 대지 손으로 돈내라 가제트도 오소소 퓨처도 그야.
So this is saying if you're kind of falling into just chasing after the causes of temporary happiness, and in this way, you know, that you are in danger of wasting the precious human life, reflect on the freedoms and richnesses, and in this way you can direct yourself to the Dharma. Reflecting upon death and impermanence, inspire yourself to spiritual practice. So then if one is able to really reflect upon death and impermanence, yes. Loso. Kariso chambo. Sumbadro, sorry. Yeah. So on the basis of cultivating death and impermanence, this is going to help inspire us because it will help us to come to the conviction that there are only two places we can go, either to the lower realms or the higher realms. So meditating upon death and impermanence is also very helpful for us in order to kind of cultivate a fear of the three lower realms, for example. And on that basis, this is something that can help us to bolster our practice of refuge and enhance many of our other studies and practices.
So
with this understanding of death and impermanence, then any practice that we engage in, we will be able to do this seamlessly without great difficulty. So death and impermanence are not focused on in the Dharma just to trouble us or to disturb our mind. They're actually a method through which we can encourage ourselves to continuously engage in the study and practice. It is said that death and impermanence, if we have an understanding and keep these consistently within our mind, this will actually become our greatest teacher, able to direct us to Dharma practice. So Milarepa said that it is through fear of death that I went into isolated mountain retreat, but then through realizing the nature of my mind in that context, I abandoned fears completely.
And
a lot of Dharma practitioners, some have related to Geshe from their own experience, saying that when one has that practice, then death is no more kind of frightening or, significant than going to sleep and waking up again the next morning.
So if
we think about it, actually, if we compare sleep and death, in both of those processes, what happens is the coarser minds are weakening and then dissolving into the subtle mind. The coarser winds are dissolving into the subtle winds. In fact, the process of falling into a deep sleep and death, there's not really a significant difference. The self doesn't disappear through the processes of sleep or death. The mind doesn't disappear through the processes of sleep or death. Okay, so now we're coming to number 3. Reflecting upon the inevitable consequences of karmic actions, inspire yourself to give up misdeeds and non-virtue.
So this
relates in the importance of understanding karma. In fact, in all of the Lam Rim texts, it gives the outline for karma as the root of all happiness and goodness, training in, faith in cause and effect, faith in karma. Yeah. So every Lam Rim text, Geshe is just clarifying a bit, talks about the importance of karma. But some Lam Rim texts, not all, say that the faith in the law of karma is the root of all happiness and goodness.
So
what happens is, as corresponding to an increased, a stronger faith in karma, then this will naturally lead one to be more concerned about non-virtue, engaging less and less with non-virtue.
Yeah,
Samores. So when when Atisha came to Tibet and seeing that people were kind of engaged in the 10 non-virtues and so forth, sort of lamenting this, he said that, cause and effect, karma, is something extremely profound, something we need to be careful of. So Geshe said, in this way, right, we'll want to be able to give up even the smallest misdeeds and then focus on the greater and so forth.
Yeah,
So if one really wants to experience happiness, then the accumulation of virtue is the cause of happiness. So there is no other way to achieve it than by that. Geshe said if he gets something a little wrong, then I'm immediately saying it. No, it's just also then it goes too fast, right? So I need to check. Yeah. So we're going to leave it at number 3. So we are on page 6, the 10 things to inspire yourself, and we are on number 3. I'm marking it very clearly this time, so hopefully I won't have to. Right. Right. So Geshe is relating a piece of advice from the holy beings, and this is a piece of advice about the importance of protecting one's mind. So we want to have an awareness that it's like the afflictions are always in the background, just looking for an opportunity to jump in.
You can
think of it as like a thief in your vicinity. The thief is always kind of walking around looking for an opportunity to be able to go in and steal something. So we can say that the afflictions, really, they have sort of two sort of functions. If we look at it very simply, there's other more extensive lists, but we can propose two. So the first is that they make the mind unhappy. And the second is that they diminish our wholesome karma, our positive potential. So if we understand that the afflictions are always waiting for an opportunity to jump in, then what we need to do is similarly be observant and steady, looking and engaging with every opportunity for virtue. So again, Geshe said that he's comparing me to the affliction. That's not very nice. He says that he has to make sure that he elucidates the words as they actually appear, because I'm always looking for an opportunity to point that out. To be clear, it's not fault finding. It's just Ngodrup has problems understanding sometimes. It's yeah. I'm always finding the mistakes, I guess. No, it's not that. It's finding my own misunderstandings usually. But he was joking, apparently. Okay, so let us dedicate with the mind of joy. Let us dedicate the virtues. If you need to get on with your day afterwards, please feel free. If you'd like to stay for questions, you're most welcome. Changchu semjo rinpoche maje panam jeju rechi jewan yamba meba yang gone gongdu bewa rishu tongni tawa rinpoche maje panam jeju rechi jewan yamba meba yang Gone gonde pewa shu jambe bao jidar kiamba dang kundu zambo deyan dejin de da kungi jesu da lo che gewa dida tamche ratu ngo dusun shebe gewa tamche gi ngowa gangla chodu ngapa de dagi gewe zawa digun Zambo juji radu ngowa gi Gangri rawe korwe jinkam de Pendan dewa malu jongwe de Chenre ziwan tenzin gyatso yi Shape si de badu tengyo chi.
마루소 다 그냥 개와시빈이 버텔라 때네 아니 좀벌린들한 중앙시 내발라서 바빠 셔와 아니 뭐게 마주 내요 간지지나야 다 가지 되던 뉴런을 받고 맞아야지.
So through the power of our virtuous karma that we have collected, may any of the imbalances in this world, for example, from the four elements and their expressions of illness, suffering, wars, and so forth, may these all be cleared away and pacified.
강기지라 somba zumbo야보 시에다 대시를 놓아야지도 우리 소소이나야다 리데와세 기비톤 놀래 강가보게 되어야지.
And through these merits, then, may all those beings be able to give rise to minds of loving kindness and therefore be able to reach happiness. And similarly, for ourselves, the practitioner, may we have good mental health, good physical health, so that we may continue in the practice. So I'll open for questions. Just let me turn the volume up a little. So yeah, if you'd like to ask questions, please feel free. Yes, thank you everybody, to our benefactors. Thanks for making these teachings possible. Yeah, Geshe says very nice flowers. Dave, do you have a question? Oh, there's Martha, a bunch of hands.
Yeah, Martha and Annie. So are Martha first and Annie?
Okay, so I'm not sure who was first, so maybe we'll do alphabetically. So we'll do Annie first and then Martha. Go ahead, Annie.
My question is about I think it was just in the Gampopa here, about reflecting on death and impermanence, inspire yourself to spiritual practice. And my question is that I seem to be getting better on reflecting on death and impermanence with someone who has already passed away or is passing away. But when I discover that someone who's been very close to has just had a diagnosis, dying soon because of illness, it's still a terrible talk, and I immediately feel like this kind of attachment.
So your voice is very faint, Annie.
Oh.
So I'm going to say back to you what I understood,
Yes,
and you just
okay.
tell me if I missed anything, okay?
Okay.
So you're talking about reflecting on death and impermanence, and
Yeah.
your experience of this is that it's really helped you to accept those people who have passed, that they are gone. And so in this way it's been fruitful, but that you're still struggling, you're having difficulty with someone who you're very close to now who is still here if they get a diagnosis for a serious illness or something like that. Did I understand correctly?
Yes, that's right. And even during the course of when someone is passing away, I'm better at dealing with that than having the news of something happening.
Oh, actually, all of you are frozen. The problem might be on our end. Can people hear my voice?
Yes.
I
Yes.
just got a notification that the connection is unstable. There's a storm moving through here, so that may be the reason. So Annie, did I get your question correctly?
You got it correctly. Mainly I was saying that I'm better at when someone is dying, at accepting that when I'm there, but it's the news of hearing that someone is about to die, but we don't know when. But
Right.
I'm still very attached.
Okay, yep, I think I got you. Nganso chiwa mi thakba di korla samlo thangna rwa dene di michi chidrone dene di kelin tubia ane yang mi kandesla gore chiwa dang halepe tanyepo impe kapla dene semtets lulu chaya dang denso tets le laru droswa yene tambo hop de kala kandesla gore netsu tambo kona midi shigires konso natsa jikok tsapo chikyores hop de kala sem datung truk drogiores datung kange chambo chikyores
아니
dire di kola kala vina
메메다 디깔다 코로 가르세카 다치 킬레케 이나 테즈 리라보로 와스 아고서 시와시마도 들킬레케 이나 테즈 리라가 우텐데 요아레스 아고서
mare moranginyamyo ko chunyamlen chegeni res rwa ine ko labswa di chio mitapala tene ko tanda midro tsa swa tes le reduas midro e dan tanya pores ine ko hop de kala netsu hakodu o soso tanya po chopo di natsa champo yere den shidro gires di kona den semtes truk drogidu nyocha dire
소소세 요아레
yeah yamlen chegende yeah korangi sem truk drogire
메메다 데이나 다 단단히 메메로 소소 다 다디요고 아고서와 어떤 집안에 봐도요 소소 라발 뭐 요아레스
mare moram mare mi jendag denso
이즈르 코로레스 이즈르 마레스 소소케다 아저야만 다 가르세요 된다 퓨로근 디와세리 메젠다 퓨로
mi jendag netso hakone deni truk drogidus midi shigires deni sem chopo chagire duas rwa konso halepe tanye po impe kapla deni dites gom shane digire dua ine hop de kala netso kona datung sem kange tegi duas
야다 대둥에 단다세야 들어와서 단단히 가도 저와 마도 아버지네 좀 뭐 파지 동로테
yeah
어다 때과야는 집안에 봐 간디스 좋거든
So Geshe's not really sure what to advise, actually, except that you just have to continue with training in death and impermanence until, like, the mind is able to face that news, face those situations with less fear.
리치가 저와 마도 아빠도 셔와도 대지전에 다 코로 도노 마테네 가고서래 강해지서 요아라와스 대 마레스 대 소노 도네라 델레소는 가르치 거거든 가르페도 어다 단데 용요소노 도나고 소소 니바지 용거라와스
So as a practitioner, right, like we want to kind of train ourselves not to react that way. He said part of it's modern life, right? It's just how society is built. When we hear the word death, right? When we hear like the name of a severe illness, then immediately the mind becomes upset and perturbed. But as a Dharma practitioner, what we want to do is apply our knowledge and have it systematized inside our mind. So we know that, like, when I hear this news, what do I train in, right? When my mind is feeling this way, what points do I cultivate? So that we know sort of what to do when we are faced with those things. So what we want to do ideally through our Dharma practice is, when we hear about this, in fact, it's not about our experience of it at all, right? It's more immediately, what can I do to help that person? And so if we can get to that point, that's going to really help us to get rid of our fear. Yeah. And, you know, the holy beings also advise us that, you know, the thing to worry about is not the death in and of itself. The thing to worry about is the future destiny, the future rebirth of the person who is passing. That's where to put our energy. Yeah. So Geshe says that, you know, like in your case, like he actually thinks it's quite an easy way to address this difficulty, which is that when you hear that somebody's dying and that they're close to death, instead of like reacting about feeling a sense of loss or whatever, immediately reflect on your own situation. Oh, I'm not there yet. I still have some time left. There's something that I can do to benefit this person. So just reframe it like that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Annie. We did get there, right? Sorry that the internet cut out and everything, but I think we got your answer. Okay.
Definitely got there. Yeah, that's very helpful, because sometimes I feel like I get too worried in an unuseful way.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
But that's yeah.
So Geshe's going to tell a story related with this question as well. He'll tell a story related with this question as well. Yeah. 第三个堂修。Yeah. 저로 할래 비도 장갈 치는 라고 만도 와스 가서 그만해. 알레 로스. 하거선. 때 강엔디 와스. 야야. 니 라바 임바 저로 처음 만도 와스. 알레. 또 어디 뭐지 중소 와스. 미디 중소 코랑 메찬 소셔다 메바디. 뭐지 중소 와스 니 가자 라바. 저로 처음 만도 와스. So this is a story, actually it's a recent story in Geshe Toronto de Pepani, right? So it was a story that Geshe heard about two Tibetans in Toronto, and they were Dharma practitioners, and so they kind of promised to, I guess, help to encourage each other in their Dharma practice. And so then these two friends, you know, one of them asked, you know, can you remind me of death and impermanence? You know, remind me of death and impermanence and how important it is to kind of be mindful of that. And so then he said he would. And so he would say to him from time to time, you know, so-and-so person died, so-and-so person has a serious illness, so-and-so person is very old. And he would kind of mention all of these people. Then what happened is his friend actually fell with a really severe illness, and he was actually kind of relatively close to having to experience death. Then he got upset, and he said to his friend, you know, why didn't you remind me of death and impermanence? Because now I really don't know what to do. And the friend replied to him, I reminded you of death and impermanence by mentioning all of these people, right? But when he was hearing about these other people who he didn't know died, he wasn't able to bring forth a feeling for that, so it didn't benefit him much. Yeah. He's like, I reminded you so many times about it. It's just you didn't feel anything. That's not my fault. Yeah, so actually when we're sort of relaxed and not in a state where we're upset about things, there's many different approaches to thinking about this. But we have to do it before it's too late. It's a little bit like with anger, right? Like when we're feeling like really enraged, we're like, okay, now I'm going to try to practice patience. It's not going to be very realistic. So we want to kind of train in it before. So when our body and mind are sort of stable and peaceful, actually, that is the time to when we have the opportunity to really think about and cultivate these things. So I think Martha was next, right? Are you still there, Martha? Or did we lose you?
Hello, Geshe.
You know what I'm going to do, Martha? If you'll bear with me, I'm going to try to turn up the volume because I'm really having trouble hearing people.
Okay, you don't.
Just give me a sec. I'm just going to turn the volume.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay. Hopefully this will help. Go ahead, Martha.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can actually, yes, I can hear you now.
Fair. So, well, my question is related to today's class. I am studying on Saturday the Serame Kempin Rinpoche Tashi studying, and the last class he spoke about wisdom and the right view. But we don't have like this space to ask him questions, so I want to ask Geshe about this. It's like he says he give us a homework to watch the self, to watch whenever we are, if we are sad, if we are happy, to watch the I, the self. So I am trying to do this, but what should I do with this I? When I see it, for example, yesterday.
Okay, is anyone else having problems making out what Marta's saying? I'm really struggling to understand you, Marta. I'm really sorry. It's like your voice keeps cutting out, and the other people also are having problems. So maybe you're swaying back and forth away from the mic, so please put your mouth very close to the microphone so we can hear you.
Here, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Stay right there. Sorry. So I got the first part. You're taking these classes with the former abbot of Serame, Geshe Tashi Tsering, and he's talking about the view. And he's asking you to look at the concept or the I or the self when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling angry, when you're feeling happy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So he says that we need to keep watching this eye every time. But okay, if I see this eye, what should I do with this eye? When I realize, okay, I'm sad. So what should I do?
Okay, all right. Ko di ngama di serame kempo di Geshe Tashi Tsering zendrachi droswan then the kochik sunson yene ko yapo komason yene de chiotang go kap chumason then the coach and nganzo dag seria di kibo impe kapula dag di tashos sem chopo impe kapula dag di tashos control ampe kapula dag di tashos yene ko yapo komasons okay tanga sem chopo yins dag di tagins then kare chegores di kare pens ko gimsen sabo komason
mare ta te ko senanga jina ya te ya tumani ra ta shi was.
So Geshe said he's not sure because he wasn't there, but he'll make a guess that he's trying to give you a method to realize the emptiness of the I or the self. Or it could be that he's trying to point to you the relationship that when you feel really unhappy, like when you're sad about something, you grasp at this saying there is this I, this self, that is feeling really sad. And that kind of grasping, that enhanced grasping at the self, makes you feel even worse. He may be trying to point to that. So there is a situation that has made you unhappy, right? So you're experiencing unhappiness. But if we put it to numbers, the real unhappiness itself, out of 100%, that's 10% of the problem. 90% of the problem is this grasping at the I, this feeling that I am unhappy. This mistaken apprehension or view of the self is making that suffering or unhappiness worse. So he thinks that what Geshe is advising you to do here is that when you're experiencing that sadness or unhappiness, for example, try to look at that self and how the self is experiencing it. See that self, that there's no pinpointable, no identifiable self, that it does not exist in the way that it appears. If you are able to do that, then likely the kind of difficulty of the unhappiness, the intensity of the unhappiness is going to greatly decrease just from doing that. So he thinks that's what Geshe is pointing at. That would be his guess. And there's another thing too, in terms of realizing emptiness. It is said that at that moment where one gets very angry at something, that object of one's anger, that person or that situation, it becomes very vivid. So that becomes a very powerful time to kind of try to contemplate and realize its emptiness. So what happens when we understand how to use emptiness correctly is whenever a strong affliction arises, whether it be attachment, whether it be anger, we're able to see how the object that affliction is arising in relation to is empty of inherent existence, and that is greatly going to reduce the experience of the affliction. Yeah, so Geshe said, of course, when we talk about the arising of anger, we're talking about that main object. There's many other causes that are coming together, but that main object. So he thinks that it may be related to that. Oh, listen. Any other questions? Anything on socials, Dave?
Let me check.
Yeah, nothing on the second. Me they got it and the catching more. That's Manzo Gajang is a logic nice Lila Yamar series.
Right.
Only Yamo Topo Lepica, Kivo Chimbo Lepica, only Kivo Meba, Chimbo Lepica, or that Tandila.
So Geshe is just glossing this further for Marta. He's saying we talk about recognizing the object of negation, the gagja, recognizing the object of negation. And this is extremely important to do if we want to understand happiness. And it is actually said that it can be actually easier to identify the object of negation. So that's the truly existent self when one is experiencing great happiness, great anger, great sadness, and so forth. So another essential instruction of the holy beings for being able to recognize this to recognize this object of negation. One of the things that's recommended is you want to go to a place where you're far away and scream or shout really loudly. If you scream or shout really loudly, this can also be helpful for identifying the object of negation. Obviously, you don't want to do this in your neighborhood or something like that. But if you go to an isolated place, this can be very useful. Another essential instruction for recognizing the object of negation is if you turn out all the lights, like at nighttime, so that you're in complete darkness, and you put your finger outwards and you continue walking until you hit a wall or another solid object, that experience can be very helpful for locating the object of negation. Right, so that, like, especially when we're in darkness, right, and we hit that solid object, immediately it appears that there is something existing from the side of that object, right? And that appearance is that object of negation. So that can be helpful as well. So all of these various examples, these were proposed by scholars and practitioners based upon their own experience. So they may be things that are helpful for us to try. So I think Rebecca has her hand up. Go ahead, Rebecca. I think you're still muted. You're still muted, I think.
Yeah. Working on
Okay,
there you are.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. I was wondering how that would be applied to a person who is just constantly depressed and upset and feels not confident. Last night I was working with someone who was trying to create a document and just perpetually said, I don't know how to do this. I'm not any good at this. This is not going to work. But it did work after 2.5 hours. And I said, look, it worked. And she said, well, that's one time.
Yeah. So you're wondering how to help this person, I guess, right?
Yes, but in terms of what you were just discussing.
Oh,
in
with
other words,
Marta's
looking
question, you
at
mean?
the eye, Marta's question.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you take Marta's question and then apply it? I think that's a very important question.
Sure. I gotcha. Nganso ko tanda michi jibju che gileka ropa che gire dua ane ko migi tsomik ropa mambo che dua dene kasang chutsu nidang sheka ko midang yamdu leka che pe kapala tengso chikyang mepa da uchi o ngadi che tugi omares ngadi hakogi omares nga yapo mendus roa nge sentes chopoins dene di yangsi chik samlo thangire dua ngamanganso sem chopo impe kaprola gagja di ngosinya gi gokap chikre sine kari ne tengsu mepa mi sem chopo ingen chikina di kandes chik samlo thangoresa. Yeah. Mi kashi konso di depression seria di yererwa kadine di sem tes chopo ngadi che tupsa mare tengsu mepa dabochi dene di
ta tedi kala do o taga ngi se alila o marwas te ke to ta te o kangi chires ta te aleng da ngi se ke chamdus
yeah
ta zo ji de so ge ji la song ji ge ji do song ji sem be ji do ta be ji do te ji go so no to ne la ha ko so ta ba sha ya bo ta de ji se to ne la so ge ya res.
So Geshe's comment on this is that if this is this person's kind of normal state, like sort of like a depressed state, right? Then telling them, like, when you're feeling sad, try to recognize the self that's feeling sad as an object of negation or something like that. That's not going to be particularly helpful to this person. And it's probably not going to help them recognize the object either. So, but what Geshe would suggest with someone like this is you want to look at the other side of the coin. So this means the Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha nature, right? The potential for liberation, the potential for arising bodhicitta, all of the positive potentials that people have within them. You want to emphasize those with such a person. This might be more helpful.
다 대우지래더니 다 대우리라 보지 말했어 저도 다 뒤에는 가제트다 세 돈요고 뭘 레레 잔이라 다도 뭐 알레데 다들이 같이 뭐지
and maybe some of those concepts are a little bit difficult for the person to fathom. So another thing that you could try is teach them about equanimity, how to bring forth a space of equanimity within their mind. This could be something very helpful for that person as well. Another helpful thing can be a sense of perspective. And that's really easy in our world today. You know, think about so many of the people enduring the most terrible suffering. When we think of that, our problem, we see that we're not so bad off. Our situation maybe is not as bad as we conceived it. So that's another maybe thing that could be helpful. So he thinks that in the context of this person, right, Marta's question was in the context of bringing forth a strong emotion to recognize that object of negation. In the case of this person, he doesn't think it's advisable to bring forth a strong emotion. That might not be something you want to do.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks you so much,
Rebecca.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I see, Dave, you have your hand up, so
yes,
go ahead.
I do. We do have a question in social media. So this is from Ladan. She's asking how to not dissolve with our, how not to dissociate with ourself in the difficult moment thinking of emptiness of self.
Yeah, so dissociation is a word that I don't know in Tibetan, Ladan. It's a word that I should look up. But I'm going to do my best to get to the gist of your question. But I think to do real justice to it, I'll have to look up dissociate in the dictionary. If there's any Tibetan readers or speakers who know the word for dissociate, don't be afraid to jump in right now. But I'll do my best to get the gist of your question. Yeah, he's like, knock off talking too much, Ngodrup. Sorry. I had a tendency to natter. So semgi tompani di kola samlo tangna nganso inji kenanglo dissociation so yimpa dang so sem yimpa den so drawa mepa samlo tang yagine so chigere rwa dene nganso dagi tompani samlo tangna di drawa mepa gi samlo tang dang di mepa soye kandes chigres
sorry siwo kamas 미소속에서 좋아서 오지 저도 그거와
nga sebu so shingimen du tsikdi hakogi amare peke nangla. So, Dave, can you read the question again?
Yes. How to not dissociate with ourself in the difficult moment, thinking of emptiness of self.
Tutsu kale kapo yimpe kaprola, nganso dang dag serie di jewa mepa, samlo ma tangya gi tap kandes chikyores, tompa ni korla, samlo tampe kapla. Yeah. Yeah.
대도 가제 다 빙봉가이 돈이 가제 더 파줘안이라. 아까서 시가 사마이 점마이.
Yeah.
근데 전에 파줘 사야 돼. 우주 지소는 또 해요 말했어.
So Geshe,
가제 더 렐레 그거와.
I don't think that this, I know dissociation is a huge thing in Western psychology. I'm not sure I can say this conceptually to Geshe. Let me just say what he said first, Dave, and I'll come to you. Let me just say what he said first. So, because what he's advising shows me that I'm not sure he grasped dissociation, not because of a fault. I just didn't find the right word. But what he's advising is just think about how there is no discernible self in the 5 aggregates, in the 5 skandhas. And then think of this verse where the self is not water, it is not fire, it is not any of the elements. This is what he was advising. Okay, go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
Right. So I've heard elsewhere in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's a notion that the life essence.
Yeah.
When there's a powerful trauma or a shock, the life essence will depart to protect itself in a sense, and then it gets lost. So that would be a form of dissociation.
Is that okay? Okay, I'll try that. Nganso la seria chikyore. La sena soso supogi nupa dabo chikyores. Rwa. Tene halepe nesu duksha chiklabna soso lupogi nupa di. La seria di. Tes nyungro droges. La tsur yongyagi. Jinso dramandra yore. Rwa. La shor drogyores. Yeah.
Ane?
He's not.
So how?
He said he's heard of this la, but he's not sure how it relates.
Right. So the question is how not to have this happen. Yeah, I guess how not to dissociate with herself in a difficult moment of thinking emptiness of self.
No, I got the question, but I think the smart thing to do may just be to leave this aside, and I'll see if I can find a word for dissociation. There's many concepts in Western psychology that don't translate well into Tibetan. More thing. Geshe-la's going to try one more thing. So Geshe said, in terms of this la, life essence, we talk about losing part of that essence, or that essence being diminished when we meet an unseen being, such as a spirit or a ghost. These can rob some of the essence.
But
the thing that people don't understand is that this la, this essence, and sometimes people say that this is soul retrieval. Please don't use the word soul for la. That's a really, really bad, because it's in Buddhism, there's no soul, right? So what Geshe is saying is that this la, this life force or this life essence, we can lose that through our own way of thinking, which isn't something that people talk about. Right. Yeah, so if we're thinking in a way that makes us fearful and things like that, these are things that diminish this. And the problem, why this is a danger, is that when this life force essence is lost, the person loses all of their energy and power, right? That's why this is not a good thing. So that's why they talk about life essence retrieval. Don't say soul retrieval. Life essence retrieval rituals and summoning back the la. There's all kinds of liturgies for that. Lagu Tsengu, this life force retrieval ritual is something that people, Geshe said, they'll sponsor a lot for that one. It's one that people really like to do.
Or Amitai practices like that.
Yeah, yes, no, that would benefit in this case as well. But sorry, Ladan, I think we had an interesting divergence. I'm not sure we got to that question. I'm going to ask for your patience, and I'll see if I can, number one, if I can find the word for dissociation, and if not, I'll contact a couple of Tibetan friends. Maybe they know the word. No. But Geshe said that in the case of this life force essence being lost and so forth because of the way of thinking, then it's really important to have a sense of proportion about our problems, right? Thinking that, actually my situation is not bad. Look at my situation compared to so many other people in the world. Look at all the positive things I have within myself, the potential for liberation, the potential for enlightenment, the Tathagarbha, Buddha nature, and so forth. These are all things that can also help us regain some strength. Yeah. So what happens is when we feel like we're losing energy, when we feel discouraged, we have to bring forth a courageous attitude. In fact, that's what we need to do, in short. And if we're able to recover our courage, our power, our energy is going to be restored as well.
Yeah, I've heard depression can do the same thing. If we're very depressed, then our life force will get lost.
Dave Chena sempre chopo impeccable dene la seri di nubanyunru drogi. Absolutely. Yes, depression is very related to diminishment of life force. Absolutely. Again. Yeah. He said like low self-esteem, depression, and lack of energy, losing one's energy or life force. These are all very related. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think if you feel like if you're fulfilling your life's purpose, then your life force will come back to you.
Yeah, nganso mitse nanglola mikyu dro tugire samlo tane dene laginu padi tetsur yongya lelapore dua.
Yeah, karina powa cherando
Yeah.
Me identity kazito the dro togere sombata powa guyares.
Yes, so Geshe said exactly. We reinforce that courage because we think that there's this goal, and that's something that I'm working towards. That's something that I am capable of. This bolsters our resolve and our energy, absolutely.
Shatone tani nganzo to botin was your dembores, nganzo se yamo momoyaro, Japa sajiwa.
Japa,
Japa.
sha japa.
But that's it, Japa. Nimu sere. So tandigi yete pusuba haleva menayo.
Yeah.
Nal shoji oh so matsoji.
So what you
Jandalo tujizo yamaraki.
Ale loso hakusong. Yeah. So Geshe was saying that when we talk about like various things, there's like an inflated sense of self-esteem. And Geshe said it's not the same as pride, which is where you're like, because pride involves also looking down on others, but it's an inflated sense of self-esteem where you just you think you're pretty great. So Geshe said that some of his friends are saying that that's actually something that you need, that if you have a little bit of that, you won't be as depressed. And maybe like, thinking that you're better off than you actually are, that might be something that's like good for your mental health and helps you to keep a happier mind. So Geshe said in the monastery, they have some people that aren't maybe that great in studies. They aren't really excelling in the traditional measure of monastic life, but they're very happy because they think they're pretty great. But let's be clear to distinguish this from pride, which with that inflated sense of self, you look down on others. That's absolutely something we want to avoid, right? So this overconfidence, right? It's kind of thinking that one is maybe more powerful or capable than one is, but it's not mixed with the mind of looking down at others. Yeah, yes, it's overconfidence.
I think just really having a feeling how amazing it is to be a human being and what that could mean or what that does mean, I think that's enough.
Milu Rinpoche di donda kandes chikyeres kare dru tugires di samlo tangna dene yang pengire dua.
Oh, you do it. Temagitani tanda shawang asal tezi shiona shawang amatkale mombo ja halre kale kavote jiturning al tani chala sachi mujos.
And also, if we filter that in, what Dave mentioned, to a knowledge of past and future lifetimes, understanding that the situation that we have right now as a human being, that means that we accomplished amazing merits, that we were able to direct ourselves to accomplish incredible positive causes. That means that we're a very capable being, right? We have, it says, with this human rebirth in the palm of our hand, something more valuable than a whole earth covered in wish-fulfilling jewels. If we were able to achieve something like that, we must be somewhat capable. So there's many reasons to have a positive outlook, actually. We talked about even if you're not wealthy, you might not be able to make as many offerings or help out as many people or causes as you like, but if you have this human body, you can use your body, your intelligence, to help others in a very direct way. There's so many opportunities. We can smile at someone, we can give words of encouragement to someone who's in a bad way. There's, so many things that we can do, that we're very capable of doing. Right. And remember that these are the words of the Buddha too, to somebody who had no material means, wasn't able to be generous. The Buddha talked about all the ways of being generous that don't require financial resources.
Ladan says, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Ladan. And I am going to, I wrote it on my hand, so I am going to see if there's a Tibetan word for dissociated. So I will get moving on that, and maybe next week we can revisit. Thanks, everybody. And Geshe promises you for next one, which will be the last installment of this cycle of Lam Rim, he's going to share a story next time. Yeah. Yeah. See you later.
Thank you, Geshe Lam.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Good day.